Hello and welcome to the ManageIQ Sprint 144 review. The sprint ended on Monday, August 31st. I'll give the overview. Harpreet will update us on the UI, Adam on the providers, Jovi on the platform, and Alberto on the API. This is a graph of the pull request activity on all the repos that we have. So as you can see, there is a slight spike in the number of pull requests open. That's the green. Pull request merged was a tiny drop below last sprint. And total PR still open is 342. I would assume that many of those are likely works in progress or something that has been kind of just stale and abandoned. If we look at the pull requests by label, you'll see that in Sprint 144, we have evened out between enhancements and bugs. The bugs are in red, enhancements in blue, and then the rest kind of sprinkled around there. I would expect this since we're just about to release Yansa GA any day now, and are now really focused on Kasparov, which will have all new features, as well as new providers. In terms of the health of the repositories, the core repositories still working on the graph, but you can see the action here. I think some interesting tidbits here are the lines of code per repo and the number of files, and then just the total number of issues. Wondering if we divide it by the code, what lines of code, whether we're going to get to some different statistics or not. Here's a similar view of each provider that's there. One of the things that I noticed as I was reviewing this again is that some providers have a lot of code, like the OpenStack provider has over 10,000 lines of code, while there's others like the Foreman provider has 880, and the two new IBM providers each have under 1,000 lines of code, so you can kind of see them bubbling up in terms of functionality. NSXT is the other new provider that we've added over the last few months. And with that, I will turn it over to Harpreet for the UI update.
Thanks, Oleg. Hello, everyone. A total of 21 PRs were merged in UI repos. Out of that, 13 bug fixes and 3 enhancements, and so on. Next slide, please. So during this sprint, we removed grid and tile views from our list view screens throughout the product. As you can see on the screenshot here, we had on the right, we had small buttons on the top right above the grid to switch between grid, tile, list views. Those have been removed. Now we only have one type of view, that's a list view. In addition to this, list views were modified a little. Previously, second column from the left on the list views always displayed an icon of the type of entity, which was kind of redundant information. And some list views had an icon to display the type of provider, as you can see on the screenshot here on the left. So that column has been removed, and a couple of other columns were removed from list views, but were added to the summary screens. And there are more details in the PR. So next slide, please. This is how the new list view looks like. We have added icons inside the columns to provide some info visually. As you can see, provider name column now has a provider type icon right before the provider name. Similarly, we have added icons to more columns. Another one here in this screenshot is the power state column to display the state with nice icons. A couple of additional columns have been added to list views as well, and to the summary screens to accommodate the info that was previously displayed in the grid and tile views. Next slide, please. All the default view settings have been removed from user settings area. Default view tab is now merged into visual tab, as there was not much left on that tab after removing GTL settings for each type of entity. You can check out the PR for more screenshots and details. Next slide, please. So in the service UI, a fix was made to honor display on button setting for button groups. As you can see in the screenshot, operations label was missing from the button group in the before screenshot, and it's being displayed in the after screenshot. Next slide, please. On the Pixie server add edit form, input dynamic prefix component was replaced with text field component that does in-place validation and displays pop-up info text to help user enter valid data in the field. And that is all I have for the UI. Over to Adam.
Thanks, Harpreet. So we continued our trend of cleaning up old unused code this sprint. So we removed the refresh new target method, which was last used by Rev. That's been replaced with the graph refresh generic new target handling. So we got rid of a lot of that old code. We also removed a lot of legacy save inventory code, which was what was used prior to graph refresh. Refresh new target was the last caller of some of these top level entry methods. There are still some code that uses, particularly Smart State, uses the lower level methods, but we got to remove a lot of the top level classes as well as a lot of the metadata relationships and link inventory code was all completely unused. So we got to delete almost 1,700 lines of code from those core EMS refresh classes, which was a big cleanup there. Next slide. Kubernetes, we found that we were handling 410 gone errors from Kubernetes watch using incorrectly. So if you ask for a resource version on Kubernetes that is older than one that it has in its database, it'll return a 410 error. And we were looking for that error in the wrong place, and so it was causing some issues. So we fixed that up on Kubernetes. And on VMware, we're handling task errors that occurred during the VM provision. Previously, if the task failed, we just returned to the state machine that the task hadn't completed yet. And what that meant was it took up until the retry limit for the state machine loop before it actually failed the provision. Now we actually fail the provision request immediately, and we return the error message from the task from vSphere, which is a lot more user-friendly. Next slide. So big news for this sprint, we have two new providers. The first one is IBM Terraform, which is a provisioning manager, and it adds a set of extra features on top of the base Terraform configuration scripts. This provider has been moved into the ManageIQ repository and is included in the main gem file now. It has the ability to discover deployed Terraform resources as configured systems. These are VMs from the IBM Terraform API. In the future, we're going to be cross-linking these back to VMs that we discovered from other providers. So if you have an Amazon or a VMware provider that you used IBM Terraform to provision these VMs to, we'll cross-link from the Terraform provider over to those VMs that we discovered as part of the normal refresh. This is going to allow us to use some of the core MIQ features like policies and cost analysis, even if you don't have those providers added. So if you just have IBM Terraform pointed to a provider that we don't support yet, you can still use cost analysis and policies on the configured systems, even if there isn't a provider yet for those. And you can follow that link for the Cloud Pack to get some more information on this provider. And next slide over to IBM Cloud, and Jay Carmen's going to be presenting this. Welcome, Jay.
Thanks, Adam. So we submitted the IBM Cloud ManageIQ provider upstream this past sprint. This has been a collaborative effort between ManageIQ team, IBM Hybrid Cloud, and IBM Power Systems, where I'm from. It's been a great experience. Big thanks to the ManageIQ team for such generous and friendly help as we've kind of cut our teeth in the ManageIQ plugin world. This plugin is a work in progress, so we're looking forward to continue that relationship to add features and improve what we've got. So initially, The plugin includes managers for IBM Power Systems Virtual Server. That's the Power Architecture Cloud offering. That includes Power servers running AIX, IBM I, and Linux operating systems. In progress right now is the IBM Cloud Virtual Servers, or VPC. That is being worked on by Jared Moore, who works with Chad Holliday and Brad Blansett, who I think lots of people know here on the team. And then there's also talk of adding more IBM Cloud managers underneath this provider in the future. So if you go to the next slide, I've recorded just a 5-minute video to kind of show what features we've already implemented. We go ahead and hit play, Adam.
It's playing.
It takes 10 seconds to drop into the.
Do I click this play button down here? Oh, there it goes.
Cool. Yeah, so we'll just go to cloud providers first. I had added several providers for some different regions that are supported in the Power Cloud right now. And then next, I show the provider registration form. This form is being changed in progress. This sprint, we should see some updates. Hit pause. There we go. So right now, like I said, we have initial support for the Power Systems virtual servers. But when we add support for other IBM Cloud managers, we'll change this registration to be a generic IBM Cloud selection. Then once that is selected, we'll get a form with some resource selection. So we'll add a drop down where the user can select Power Virtual Servers or VPC or any other resources in the future. And then we'll have some fields that are dependent upon that selection to set up the respective service. So Power Virtual Servers requires a GUID and an API key. So now we're going to look at the instances that have been collected. We can see a few instances in each region. So I think I select one and we'll look at some details here. This instance is running AIX. You can see we've collected most of the generic instance information. We can see here that this VM has 1 vCPU, 2 gigs of memory, and a boot disk. I'm also going to show we use this advanced settings data structure to store something specific to the Power Systems virtual servers. So these servers are running on top of the Power VM hypervisor, which allows allocation of processors in terms of partial cores. And so when you're provisioning a VM, you can set up a shared processor allocation in units of 1/4 of a core. And so to track that, we put that information here, and the usual instance processor field will show the user the vCPUs from the perspective of the host VM. This should drop back to the instance details in a second. Okay, and so next, I think I just scroll down a little to show some of the relationships that we have collected. So we've implemented this Cloud Manager along with Network Manager and Storage Manager. So you can see the networks, subnets, ports, and volumes associated with this particular instance. we'll go to the network topology to show the cool demo view. This view is definitely the coolest view to pop up on a demo. You can see our cloud managers associated with these networks. One thing particular about the Power Systems virtual server is that our networks are defined in terms of subnets. So you can see that networks and subnets are one-to-one in this graph. And then you can see the relationships to the VMs there. Then we'll go and take a quick look at the storage manager volumes. And we can see a quick view of volumes in the inventory. We'll load one of those, and we can see pretty standard stuff with properties and relationships defined. Yeah, so like I said, this is a work in progress. It's been a great experience. Thanks, especially to Adam for helping us out so much. We're looking forward to continuing this. Thanks, Adam. Back to you.
Thanks
so much, Jay. That's a really great amount of progress in a short amount of time. That was an awesome demo. Thank you. And that's it for providers. Over to Joe V.
Yeah, Jay looked great. Adam looked great. Yeah, so 18 PRs were merged across the platform space this sprint. Now, there were a couple of noteworthy enhancements that were contributed specifically into the podfication space. Clarifications were made to the ManageIQ operator README, and descriptions were also added for deploying OpenID Connect in the podified environment and configuring with CA-signed certs. Another enhancement was contributed to avoid bringing up PostgreSQL and Kafka Zookeeper services when external services were being specified. A couple of noteworthy bugs were addressed. One bug was fixed where smart state jobs were not running in a podified environment, and another bug addressed widget update failures when the owner had no groups. And that's a summary of the noteworthy enhancements in the podified space. On to Alberto.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, so for the API, we have one enhancement by Drew. Here in the specification for the sort order, traditionally we've just accepted the shorthand ASC or the ASC for ascending or descending, but we now support optionally the full form ascending or descending, as shown as these two examples here for getting providers. And that's it for the API. Okay.
All right. That brings Sprint 144 to a close. Sprint 145 is in 2 weeks, as usual. And I want to thank everybody. I want to thank all the presenters, all the contributors. Special shout out to the IBM teams for adding the 2 new providers to ManageIQ. And look forward to lots of great progress in the next sprint review. Thanks, everyone.